I'm sure most of you have seen a thrilling plane crash movie at some point. If you've watched a few, you've probably noticed that survival rates in such ordeals are low. Especially if a plane crashes in the mountains, where the chances of making it out alive might plummet even faster than the plane itself. That's why the story I'm about to tell you is truly chilling, literally and figuratively speaking. I am talking about the Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571 disaster, also known as the 1972 Andes plane crash. This event became one of the most extraordinary survival stories taking place in the vastness of the Andes mountain range. And just like the plane, we are going to dive right into it. On October the 13th, 1972, a plane departed from Montevideo, Uruguay, carrying a rugby team to play a friendly match against another team in Santiago, Chile. To cross the Chilean border, the aircraft had to transcend the high peaks of the Andes mountain range. Due to poor visibility and some impressive shitty navigation skills by the pilots, the plane started to descend for landing while still flying above the snow-covered ridges. Turbulence was now rocking the aircraft more and more, and the young guys of the rugby team were joking about how they were about to crash into the Andes, which sounds a bit ironic considering what was about to happen to everyone on board. By this time, the clouds were moving behind the plane, and instead of seeing a runway, the pilots enjoyed a beautiful panoramic view of a 3,000-foot rock formation right in front of them. With roaring engines, the rear part of the aircraft struck a ridge, scattering the fuselage and wings. Weirdly enough, the impact turned the front part of the fuselage into the world's largest bobsled, while the tail section went skydiving together with its passengers. The front part violently buried itself in a deep blanket of snow, killing and wounding several passengers, including the pilots. Soon after, the pilot that was still alive mumbled some words about how they passed the Andes Mountains over Curico, which was obviously bullshit and a clear indication of who was fucking up the navigation part. Not that it mattered a lot, because the surviving passengers found themselves stranded on a 12,000-foot high snow-covered plain surrounded by nothing but mountains. Not long after the crash, the sun began to set, and the survivors were about to experience their first hellish night in sub-zero conditions. Of the 45 passengers, 33 people survived the initial crash, which is not too shabby for a plane crashing into a mountain. In the following days, the survivors began to take inventory of any supplies, looking for food and water as well. A few guys carried luggage around, forming a big X mark near the fuselage, hoping to make the site easier to find. During that time, multiple search and rescue planes were spotted, but none of the planes could see the wreckage, which figures because from the air, the crash site probably would have looked like this. Good luck with that. Using a transistor radio and a makeshift antenna, the survivors were shocked to learn that the search operation was called off after 11 days. While suffering from extreme hunger, you can imagine that news did not land very well either for the rugby team. It became clear to some survivors they had to take drastic measures if they were to stay alive even a few more days. By now, the choice to resort to cannibalism became a loaded discussion within the group. Specifically, I am talking about the moral dilemma they faced, not if they were going to have a nice dry Chardonnay to go with their friends' back ribs. Oh, and white wine was not on the menu anyway, so that's too bad as well. And even if there was any, it would have made the whole thing slightly more romantic than it should have been. Let me show you. Yeah, I think you get the point by now. Mildly inappropriate, to say the least. Anyway, after some consideration by the group, they reckoned that death was inevitable if they deprived their bodies from any nutrition whatsoever. For that reason, they were going to cut flesh from the bodies of the deceased. They started with the pilot, probably because he was the least popular in the group, crashing the plane and all. Not long after, they began to cut up the bodies of their fellow passengers. By eating human flesh, they regained strength and survived the following days and night. After more than 2 weeks, an avalanche filled the interior of the plane with snow, killing 8 more people. While being buried in snow, an intense blizzard kept the remaining survivors trapped for multiple days inside the fuselage. When the storm subsided, they dug a tunnel and freed themselves, which must have been nice considering being buried for days between yet more dead people. While searching the area around the crash site, a small group found the tail section of the plane. Inside, the men found a battery, and they figured to use that battery to power a radio located in the cockpit back at the wreck site, which was a great idea except for the part that it wasn't going to work. Despite the 12,000-foot elevation, the morale in the group was at an all-time low, as more and more people died from malnutrition and exposure. As a result, a final and desperate plan was forged to send out people on a hike and find a way out of the Andes mountain range towards the green Chilean plains. Knowing they would not survive even one night out in the open, the survivors used isolation material from the plane's tail section to sew themselves a sleeping bag. They climbed for 3 days just to reach the first summit to the west. On top of the ridge, they hoped to see the green valleys of Chile. Instead, they saw only more mountains, which was a bummer. Since they already ate the pilots, there was nobody left to be mad at either. 2 of the 3 men continued the journey, taking the food of the 3rd guy to extend the hike. They slowly descended into a giant valley and disappeared as 2 little dots surrounded by glaciers and snow. After walking for 10 days straight, the 2 men encountered a Chilean shepherd, and by then the couple knew they would all be rescued. The 16 remaining survivors spent a total of 72 days in the Andes Mountains, facing extreme cold, starvation, and an avalanche. But hey, in the end, 16 people out of 45 survived the disaster. If you consider the lack of oxygen, extreme cold, starvation, and being buried by a frickin' avalanche, then, in a weird way, things could have been worse. We want to give another thanks to our sponsor, Displayed, for helping us create this video. Thanks to all our viewers for watching this culinary survival story. Take care, or don't. See you anyways.